It is Wickett's World on a Friday right here on 1350 ESPN. Thank you so much for being here. Coming up, Tyler Dunn joins me at the back half of this hour at 12:30 to talk some NFL before we get out of here for Cubs baseball right here on 1350 ESPN. The Cubs coming back home, and Ron and Pat will have the call 12:45 for the pregame right here in Des Moines. So before we get to any of that stuff, Pete, there were a couple of huge stories that popped up this week. And I'm going to start with college football because we are partially in Big 12 country. We're 40 minutes from Ames. Iowa State fans are everywhere in the state of Iowa.
Mm.
And Big 12 media days were, a week ago?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we find out that Texas and Oklahoma are having conversations to leave the Big 12 and go to the SEC. When I heard the news, I thought, this can't be real. This seems like something that gets, rumored about all the time. And then you start to dig deep because every journalist that covers a Big 12 school, especially the ones that cover Oklahoma and cover Texas, are diving into this to try to find out, is there smoke? Is there fire? Are there real conversations going on? And of course, everybody at Texas and everybody at Oklahoma is like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so you start to read more, and there are reports, there is speculation, there's all of this, but it's looking more and more like at least the conversation has been had between the SEC and Oklahoma and Texas, which,
oh my God.
I mean, if this were to happen, let's talk about it from a Big 12 perspective, all right?
This would be terrible.
There would be no more Big 12.
No more Big 12.
You can't. Okay, there's already 10 teams in the Big 12 right now, all right?
Mm-hmm.
You lose the two that really matter, with all due respect to Iowa State fans. Football-wise, you haven't really mattered until the last 4 or 5 years. Once in a while, Seneca Wallace plays well, but for the most part, Iowa State has not mattered when it comes to Big 12 football. So this would be, from Iowa State's perspective, if there were to be a Big 12, this would be great for Matt Campbell because then they could be the big dog of a alleged Power 5 conference.
Yeah.
The problem is you lose Texas and you lose Oklahoma. You are no longer a Power 5 conference. You don't want this if you are everybody else in the Big 12 because you're not going to replace Texas and you're not going to replace Oklahoma because you're not going to get one of the two big fish out of the Big 10 to come to the Big 12. You're not going to get anybody out of the Pac-12 to come join the Big 12. And the only teams that I've heard the only rumored team I've heard that could come to the Big 12 is Houston, which is not a draw.
Ooh, Houston. Wow.
It's not a draw to be like, yeah, we lost Texas.
But we got Houston.
Woo! Yeah, I know we lost Oklahoma, who's always in the college football playoff, but we got Houston. You know what I mean? Houston, we have a problem. So from a Big 12 fan's perspective, I don't know what happens to the conference if this does. And it's all rumor and speculation. We're not going to know for a while. But from the Big 12 fans' perspective, this is a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah.
Because your conference is going to go away. Why would Texas want to do this? Why would Oklahoma want to do this? Why would you want to leave a conference where you, for the most part, have been the big dogs for the last 100 years?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to do it? Well, it always comes down to one thing. Money. No matter what, it always comes down to dollars. It always comes down to TV contracts. It always comes down to how many eyes can I get on my product. And the SEC dollar is much bigger. The SEC pie is bigger. The SEC is attached at the hip with ESPN and their new contracts that are always coming up and whatnot. So from Texas and Oklahoma's perspective, and if it is really all about money, which it generally is in college sports or all sports, this makes complete sense. You agree?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So from a football perspective, though, why would you leave the conference where you have been the big dog, where you have been the big fish? I mean, Oklahoma has been great. With Bob Stoops and now Lincoln Riley, they're always a top 5, top 10 program. They're always in contention for a big bowl or a college football playoff appearance. You roll most of the Big 12. Yeah, there's a couple of years where they'll lose a K-State game or they'll lose to Iowa State or whatever. The Red River Shootout's always great. Red River rivalry, sorry. But if you're Oklahoma, why would you leave? Again, money is the answer. But you were making a big mistake, I think, if you are Oklahoma from a football perspective to go to the SEC. Texas hasn't been squat since Vince Young beat USC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've had a couple of decent teams, but we talked about it last week, how it's always been, oh, is Texas back? And then Texas is never back. You go from playing, like, you don't see the stretch in the SEC where you get Baylor, Kansas, and then Texas Tech.
Yeah.
We're going to have a combined 8 wins this year. You don't get that in the SEC. Every week or every other week, here comes Georgia, here comes Alabama, here comes Florida, here comes LSU. Here comes, at one time, kids, you may not know this, Tennessee was a great program. Not so much anymore, but Tennessee was really, really good, and maybe they start to get things rolling. Every once in a while, Kentucky is really, really good. Mike Stoops' defense there a couple of years ago was one of the best, if not the best, in the country. So from a football perspective, you are going from a conference that is one of the bottom 2 in terms of, power and strength, top to bottom.
To the big dogs.
To the best of them all.
Yeah.
Again, if it's only money, I understand it. This is not a good football move for either school.
No.
Now, if you're wondering when all of this can happen, well, we got a couple of years. I think the Big Ten's TV deal, because this happens every so often. You remember all the craziness with the Big 12, with Nebraska leaving and Mizzou leaving and all this, West Virginia, all these teams moving around college football. I struggle to remember which conference West Virginia is in. I still think A&M is in the Big 12. I still sometimes think Mizzou is in the Big 12. I mean, you're a Mizzou student.
Yes.
You know how hard your schedule is every year.
Yes.
And it's because you're usually a doormat.
Yeah.
You're a bottom SEC school.
It's cool. Yeah. It's been struggling some days,
Mm-hmm.
It's always fun when you look at the first game of the schedule last year and it's Bama. And you're like, oh man, so excited for the season when we have number 1 Bama coming to town. That's so cool.
When was it last year they beat LSU?
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that's a huge win.
I was at that game.
Were you?
I was.
I watched that one on TV and I'm like, man, I got a lot of Missouri friends. I lived down in Kansas City for a long time, so a lot of my friends went to Mizzou. And I thought, big win. That's huge. What a big win for Missouri to beat LSU. And then everybody beat LSU.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very impressive anymore because it wasn't the Joe Burrow year. It was maybe the most disappointing team in college football last year was LSU. But you got to win.
That's a win. We'll take it. We'll take it.
But every year or every 4 or 5 years, there's always conversations about conference realignment.
Yeah.
Nebraska here and Utah this and how the Pac-10 or the Pac-12. We need this number of teams to have a conference championship game. The Big Ten adds Maryland and Rutgers, which is still, I don't think they belong.
Weird.
It's still super weird.
It's weird.
When I'm watching Wisconsin travel to Rutgers, I'm like, why are they playing a non-conference game? Oh, that's right. Rutgers is in.
It's a conference game.
Although they're going to be good getting Shiano back.
Yeah.
I think Rutgers is going to be not Rutgers in the next 5 years, but I digress. So this happens every so often that we get this conference realignment conversation going on. And it always comes down to TV deals. Like you get the teams moved and shuffled and pieces put where they are. Then the new TV deal takes over and that lasts for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Big Ten's deal is done next year. I don't see anyone leaving the Big Ten because the Big Ten Conference makes so much money from the Big Ten Network and from ESPN and ABC. It's one of, if not the most lucrative conference in the country. I don't see a whole lot happening out west. I don't see, the TV contract for the SEC ends in 2025, and I don't see a whole lot happening before then. But where there is smoke, there is always fire with conference realignment. And when you have Texas, who is the bell cow, when you have Texas, who is the biggest financial fish of them all, as opposed to Oklahoma, who's the better football team right now. But when you have Texas moving around, I mean, it's Texas is Notre Dame big, Texas is Alabama big, Texas is Ohio State big, Texas is USC big. Texas is one of the biggest players in college football because it's state, because of the donors, because of its place in the pantheon of college football. Texas matters, always matters. And so when they start pushing their weight around, it's like, okay, we got to start paying attention to this. So What will Texas do? What will Oklahoma do? They're going to be a package deal. I can't see one going and one staying.
Probably, yeah.
But it is going to spell bad news, I think, if you are a Big 12 fan. I just get a feeling that the Big 12 is going to be gone, which leads to the next question. What's the future of college football?
Power Four?
That's what it's going to wind up being, like 4 super conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kick maybe Iowa State goes up to the Big 10.
Do they want that, though? I was thinking about that. Do they really want to be in the Big 10 with Iowa?
Where else are they going to go? They're not going to go to
Yeah.
the SEC.
No.
I mean, any smart person would stay out of the SEC. They're not going to go to the ACC because they're not exactly Atlantic Coast, although it doesn't really matter, I guess.
I mean, Notre Dame was in the ACC.
Notre Dame was in the
Indiana.
ACC. Maybe at some point, I've been saying this for most of my career. At some point, Notre Dame is going to have to join a conference.
I think it's slowly but surely going to creep up on them that they're going to have to join a conference.
I think so. And I think the reason that the college football playoff was 12 and not 8 is because Notre Dame is reluctant, because it's the top 6 conference winners and then the next highest 6 ranked teams get into the college football playoff. Well, if you did top 6 and then 2 more, Notre Dame finishes 11, they're out. But with this new thing, they're going to be in a couple of years when that kicks in. Maybe Notre Dame says, okay, fine. We're going to join the Big Ten finally, where they belong, and Iowa State joins the Big Ten. How great would that be for the Big
Honestly,
Ten?
that would be great.
And then you put Notre Dame in the East, and you put Iowa State in the West. You know, I just think that makes the most sense.
That East would be very, very competitive.
What do you do with the rest of the Big 12? I mean, you ship some out west. Texas Tech goes to the West.
Goes to the highest bidder.
That's the right answer. You're right about that. That is it. It actually just goes to who else is going to pay the most. You know, TCU and Texas Tech, they wind up in the Pac 12, 14, 16, the West, whatever it's going to be called. You know, you shift it around. I think that's the future of the Big 12, the future of college football for, maybe 4 or 5 years from now. So we shall see. All right, coming up, I'm going to jump to the big NFL story, the big NFL news that is out there, and that is the edict that has come down from the world of the rule makers, the COVID situation, the vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Gotta say, I kind of like what the NFL is going to do. We'll talk about it next here on 1350 ESPN.
Nice.
Wickett's World continues here on 1350 ESPN and also on the ESPN Des Moines Facebook page. Hello if you're watching us on ESPN Des Moines. On the Facebook page, we appreciate it very much. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter at ESPN DSM. All right, so I think the NFL is mad. I think the NFL is pissed. I think the NFL is sick of messing around or letting other players mess around with getting vaccinated for the COVID-19 or getting the COVID-19 vaccination. So much so that yesterday, the NFL released a statement saying they plan on playing, remember, it's a 17-game schedule, so everybody gets one bye week. So the NFL has confirmed this from Tom Pelissero, who says the NFL has informed clubs that if a game cannot be rescheduled during the 18-week season in 2021 due to a COVID outbreak among unvaccinated players, The team with the outbreak will forfeit and be credited with a loss for playoff seeding. So basically what that means is if you already have your bye week in week 4, and then there's an outbreak of unvaccinated players within you can't reschedule a game. You still can't play games with a certain amount of infected players. So if you have not enough players to play and you're past your bye week and you're the New York Giants, let's just say, and the Giants are playing the Raiders, the Giants will forfeit that game. Think about what that means, all right? Not only do you not get a game, when you get an L for the playoff standings, and that can come back to bite your entire team, your entire franchise, because you wouldn't get the vaccine or chose not to get the vaccine. It also means that 52 other guys don't get game checks because, let's say, 7 guys have an outbreak or 5 guys and 3 trainers and a couple of other staff, whatever. So now you are putting this responsibility, the idea that it's being forced upon you, you choose not to take it. Listen, it is your choice to get the vaccine. There is no doubt in my mind, but the NFL is saying if there's an outbreak and you cannot play, you are not going to get any sort of leeway. We're not moving games around this year. Maybe we can do it in a bye week if 2 teams match up, but the odds are it's not going to. They are going to take away the game from you. You get an L. Your teammates are not going to be playing or getting paid. What a ballsy move by the National Football League. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Unvaccinated, check that. Vaccinated individuals who test positive and are asymptomatic can return to duty after 2 negative tests 24 hours apart. Again, I read from Tom Pelissero's Twitter page. Unvaccinated individuals are still subject to a 10-day isolation period. So if you test positive and you have not gotten the vaccine, you still got to sit out 10 days. Remember, Cam Newton had it last year. They're not going to be moving games all over like they did last year. The NFL's memo says, quote, every club is obligated under the Constitution and bylaws to have its team ready to play at the scheduled time and place. A failure to do so is deemed conduct detrimental. There is no right to postpone a game. If a club cannot play due to a COVID spike in vaccinated individuals, we will attempt to minimize the competitive and economic burden on both participating teams. And then there is a whole bunch of stuff here. I could read you the whole thing, but it is boring. Mm. Unreal. If a game is canceled and cannot be rescheduled within the current 18-week schedule due to a COVID outbreak, neither team's players will receive their weekly paragraph 5 salary. You don't get vaccinated, your team can't play, you're not getting paid, and neither are your teammates. You want to see a locker room turn real quick on Cole Beasley? You want to see a locker room turn real quick on Josh Allen, who's not gotten the vaccine yet? You want to see, and I don't know who has and who hasn't. You want to see, you had until, 3 weeks ago to opt out for your COVID safety. They were given, and you would still get paid. You had that opportunity 3 Fridays ago. Not anymore. I don't know if Patrick Mahomes has the vaccine. I assume he does. He seems like the kind of guy that would get the vaccine. I don't know if Tom Brady has the vaccine. We'll find out. Mm-hmm. I mean, we may or may not ever find out. You don't want there to be, and even if you're team vaccine, you don't want there to be a COVID outbreak, all right? All joking aside, this thing is still rearing its head. This thing is still more contagious than ever because of the Delta variant, and I'm not going to get into this and that and this. That. I'm telling you right now, this thing's not done because of a number of reasons. And you're seeing it with the Olympics. I mean, how many people, as we are getting to the opening ceremonies, how many people have tested positive that are athletes that are going over there into a city, into a country that has had a terrible record with COVID? So it can happen to anybody. I mean, it was the female gymnast from the U.S. Olympic team a couple of days ago, the alternate. Mm-hmm. Thank God it wasn't Simone Biles. Yeah. That was the first thing that crossed my mind. I'm like, U.S. gymnast? She has COVID? Is it Simone Biles? Please, God, no. Please, God, no. So, yeah, it is a balls move by the NFL to say, if you're not vaccinated and there's an outbreak and it's on you, you're not getting your game moved. In most scenarios, you're not getting your game moved, and you're not going to get paid. And if you want to see what motivates athletes more than anything,
It's money.
it's money. All right. Talk about, I mean, how often do you see a team who's, won a Super Bowl or won a championship or whatever, and their contract is up, and they can take $10 million to play with Team A, they just won the championship with, but they can take $30 million. And I'm not saying don't go get your money. I've never said that about athletes. Get your money while you can, especially football. Your window is this big. But how often is it always, yeah, I really want to win about a championship, but I'll take the $6-7 million extra dollars. This is the deal for the NFL players. Get vaccinated, get the shot, and prevent as best you can. Now, vaccines, as we know, and I'm not going to get into a vaccine conversation, but they're not 100% effective. I've had a flu shot, still got the flu before. People are getting, the vaccines. 1% of people are still getting COVID. That of the people who are sick with it, 1% are vaccinated. 99% of the other people aren't. But regardless, power move, great move by the NFL, in my opinion. If the goal is to get the whole league vaccinated, this is a smart move. Do it or risk not getting paid, and do this or risk your teammates not getting paid. Money talks. This will ramp up the vaccination efforts for sure in the NFL. Speaking of the NFL, Tyler Dunn from GoLongTD.com is coming up on the other side, one of the best football minds in the country. He's got some strong opinions and takes. We will get to his thoughts, including who he thinks the starter for Green Bay will be, as we're hours away from training camps opening all across the National Football League. That's next on 1350 ESPN.
All righty.
Joining me on the line right now, you read his outstanding work at GoLongTD.com. You follow him on Twitter at Ty Dunn, and he is a man who has blown me off 3 weeks in a row. My good friend Tyler Dunn is on the line. Tyler, appreciate the time so much. 50% of me thinks you're going to duck out of this interview early.
I'm not going to lie, Mike. It's really tempting to just tell all of your listeners right now, F it, I got to go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, like,
Something came up.
I got Sammy Watkins calling me on the other line, or Josh Allen is hitting me up on my phone, so I got to...
But they've only gotten one side of the story. So just so everybody knows, Mike, I think he's embellishing this one just a tad, leaving out a few important details, but here we are. So let's do it.
I only get 12 minutes with you, Tyler. I don't have time for your lies. I do want to hit the Big Five here in Des Moines. There are 5 big fan bases. Jeremy Fowler was on Greeny's show earlier today here on 1350 ESPN, and to paraphrase, he told Mike Greenberg that there is no trade market for Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. I know later today is the deadline for opting out. I don't expect him or anybody to do that for COVID rules, and he'd still keep his money. But do you believe that statement from Jeremy Fowler?
He's as plugged in as they get. Like, Jeremy's fantastic and just a really good guy too. But I don't know. Like, maybe I think he may be reporting that because it is true. If Green Bay is sticking to their stance that they aren't going to trade Aaron Rodgers, then I guess it's true, right? Literally, there wouldn't be a market for him. But the second that they say he's available, and God, they better say it, because he ain't walking through that door. I'm telling you right now, day one of training camp, I will be shocked. I'll go on your show, God, as many times as you want, and it's 4:30 a.m. If he shows up, I can't see it, Mike. He's dug in. So Green Bay's got to face that reality that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to just change his mind and show up with a big smile on his face. And when they do decide that, which I think is inevitable at some point, there will be a market for the league MVP. I mean, you're really going to go with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater over Aaron Rodgers? You're really going to go with Derek Carr? You're really going to go with Tua Tagovailoa? I mean, those are 3 off the top of my head. He's arguably the best in the game. So there would instantly be a major, major market for him, no doubt.
So you think Rodgers, you're going on record, you think Jordan Love will be the starter, barring any injuries or any setbacks. You think Jordan Love's the starter when training camp opens, training camp closes, and they start the regular season?
You know, I'll say this. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the starter. I mean, maybe they get Derek Carr in a trade, or maybe they want to get a veteran going for a few weeks before they want to turn it over to Jordan Love. But, yeah, I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers week one. I mean, you know him as well as I do, Mike. He's got a unique personality. You know, when you're out, you're out. Family, friends, ex-teammates. Brian Gutekunst appears to be out from everything I've heard. That short of people getting fired, short of major structural change to the way the Green Bay Packers do business, Aaron Rodgers does not want to play for the Packers. Like, I get it. There is that lingering possibility that he just shows up and he has that smirk on his face and he says all of us in the media just launched a smear campaign and he just wanted to chill for the offseason. That's out there. But, people close to him, people on the team, they're not holding their breath. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. They don't see this happen.
I could talk Packers with you for hours, you know that, but I do want to move on. There are 4 other major fan bases here in Des Moines, and It was announced about an hour ago, and I don't quite understand why anyone would want to go on HBO Hard Knocks, but the Hard Knocks team this year will be the Dallas Cowboys. With a team coming off a season like they had last year, with all the uncertainty about Mike McCarthy and whether or not he's the right man for the job, Dak coming back off injury, as horrible as the defense was, what is Dallas doing going on Hard Knocks?
Well, if it's the watered-down, sanitized version of Hard Knocks that we've seen the last couple of years, then I guess we're not going to see much of anything. The team signs off on it, and, that Raiders Hard Knocks was a joke. There was nothing to take away. All those personalities in that locker room, and you give the public that nonsense, it was a waste of time every week. So, I'm sure Jerry Jones isn't going to broadcast anything that Jerry Jones does not want out there. We're not going to get the real story of the Dallas Cowboys. Hard Knocks was great early on, right? Those early years when it was a little more raw.
Yeah, the Browns or the Cowboys, like those, or the Browns or the Dolphins, those were good Hard Knockses.
Right. I think it's a waste of time now. It's just overly sanitized, and it's like it's going through these poll-tested PR discussion sessions every single second of every single episode. Like, no thanks. Give me Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Is Dallas in a position to make the playoffs next year? For as bad as everything got after the Dak injury, for as bad as the defense was, Mike McCarthy in year 2, do you expect Dallas to get to 8, 9, 10 wins?
Absolutely not. I think they're going to be a disaster. It looks good. They win the press conference. They win the press conference, Mike. Like they give Dak. I like Dak too. He deserves the money, but whether it's him or Amari Cooper or Zeke Elliott or DeMarcus Lawrence, all they get all their money, and it looks good, but the inside out, they're not built the right way. The line is aging and not nearly what it was 3-4 years ago. The defense is historically bad, like really, really bad. Teams just moved the ball at will on them last season. I don't really think they got that much better. Like, is Dan Quinn turning that unit around? I don't think so. These draft picks that they brought in, a lot of them have a ton of red flags character-wise. We heard that before in Dallas, right? Something could blow up there. I just don't see a Mike McCarthy-led operation improving on defense. I've talked to these players in Green Bay. They said in training camp, and we saw it too at practice, they never hit. They never hit. And his attention was toward the offense. He wasn't even around those drills on defense much at all. I think that just seeps through every pore of your organization, and they'll never be a team that wins with defense. And their offense, I'm sure they'll put up a lot of points, put up a lot of yards, but that's not going to be enough.
Talking with NFL insider Tyler Dunn. Read his outstanding work at golongtd.com, on Twitter at Ty Dunn. Just a windy city. I know that this kind of feels like a bit of a reset drafting Justin Fields, but is Matt Nagy's career in Chicago tied to Justin Fields?
It better be. And Ryan Pace and everybody there. I think everybody you catch them in an honest moment, I bet they're pretty surprised that they all kept their jobs, right? Like, they could not cross the ball past midfield with Nick Foles for, it seemed like, a month and a half. And the season has just taken this tailspin. And then they kind of get into the soft part of their schedule. They finally play Mitchell Trubisky only because Foles got hurt. He beats those three teams, and they sneak into the playoffs at 8-8, and everybody kind of keeps their jobs. So it is strange. I think a lot of fans were shocked that they're going to run this back. And, hey, they approached it this offseason with the sense of desperation that they needed. You have to hand it, I guess, to Nagy and Pace that they took a swing at every single potential quarterback. We wrote about it at Go Long a few weeks ago. I mean, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger even, Carson Wentz, they were exploring everything. And they really thought they were going to get Russell Wilson. They thought that John Schneider was done. Like, Schneider was ready to move on from what I was told. And Carroll's the one that kind of swooped in and said, oh, not yet. I don't want this to be my legacy. And, yeah, they end up with Justin Fields. Maybe that was the best option all along because he's so young, because you buy yourself more time with a young quarterback. You get him going. If he shows any promise at all, they're going to keep everybody around another year. So I think it was smart in the end. And I don't know. I'm no mock draft and all 22 expert, but anytime I watched Ohio State, he was unbelievable. He's getting the snot beat out of him against Clemson and throwing 6 touchdowns. Give me that guy.
That rib, I can't believe he got up from that shot he took in that game late, what was that, January or late December, whatever it was. Staying in the North, how much confidence do you think the Vikings have in their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, behind closed doors, not in front of those microphones?
Man, too much, I think. I think that they kind of convinced themselves that Kirk Cousins can get them to the Super Bowl when they could have got out of that contract last year, right? They didn't have to give him that extension. They really could have hit reset. Yet they try to have it both ways. They bring him back, they give Dalvin Cook his money, and then they reset on defense. And a lot of these young players, they were exposed last year. I'll say this, though. I'm negative about all these teams. I mean, I like what the Vikings are doing now. Like, and I'm not even really a Kirk Cousins fan, but all of a sudden that defense is looking pretty good. Those young players that they drafted, especially the secondary, they get a full off season to learn Mike Zimmer's defense, which is so hard to learn, maybe the hardest in the NFL. And they bring in a lot of veterans, guys like Patrick Peterson. I mean, they're going to help that room grow big time. And offensively, they can score at will. I mean, which is crazy to say with Kirk Cousins, but my gosh, when it's humming, I think that they can keep up with just about any team in the NFC. So, yeah, all of a sudden, especially if Aaron Rodgers isn't in that NFC North, the Vikings, the expectation should be to win the division and compete for a Super Bowl.
Before I ask you about Mahomes and the Chiefs, if you were to power rank 1 through 4 the NFC North, where do you go, considering you don't think that Mr. Rodgers is going back to Green Bay?
I'll still put Green Bay number 1 because I probably like Jordan Love more than most.
You think the Packers can win the North with Jordan Love this year?
No doubt. Yeah. Brian Gutekunst has done a really good job. It's weird to kind of see, his name dragged through the muck and everybody saying he didn't do enough around Aaron Rodgers. I think he scored more points than any team in the NFL. I get it. Rodgers has a lot to do with it, but these other players aren't slouches. Like, they've found guys like A.J. Dillon and Marquez Valdes-Scantling who break the mold at their positions. I mean, MVS is big, strong, fast, led the league in yards per reception. A.J. Dillon, 250, 7.8% body fat. We all see the quads. I mean, he is maybe Derrick Henry 2.0. And defensively, it's funny, they show that graphic of all these first-round picks they've taken on defense like it's a bad thing. Well, don't people know Mike McCarthy's defense is meltdown after meltdown? They needed to completely reset on defense. And all these players that they've been drafting are only going to get better. So, yeah, I think with Jordan Love, they can win the division because the team is that deep wherever you look.
So you've got Green Bay 1. It sounds like Minnesota 2, Chicago 3, and then Detroit, I assume?
You got it.
Yeah.
That's got to be it in my head, yeah. Detroit just is, it's a hard roster to look at. I'll say this, though. I think in Vegas, they're at 5. At 5 wins in Vegas. They have a 17-game schedule. Give me the over. I think golf can get them to 5 or 6.
Oh, Said nobody ever. I got to get the last team in here before I get you out of here, Tyler. Again, golongtd.com's Tyler Dunn joining me. There are a lot of Chiefs fans all around this state. Closest NFL stadium is Arrowhead. They were embarrassed in the Super Bowl. How much of a chip is actually playing, or are the Chiefs actually playing with on their shoulder this year?
Oh, my God, it's got to be huge. First of all, I love that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, that they're always talking about, like, dynasty and going undefeated. And, I mean, that's good. Keep it into existence. Players are terrified to talk like that. They don't give a crap. Like, I love it, and they're absolutely right. Like, they absolutely could run the table with the talent they have. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, he's going to go down as the greatest quarterback ever when it's all said and done. Nobody's ever done stuff that he's done. I think that they'll absolutely have a chip on their shoulder. And, you know, I get it. There's some problems on defense. There's some holes on defense. So that it ended up catching up to them to a degree. But more than anything, they just had to protect Patrick Mahomes. And he was running for his life. They addressed that in a big way. They'll be good. I think they're the team to beat, no doubt.
Tyler, I know that what you have written about over at golongtd.com is getting a ton of national attention. For those that are unfamiliar with your site, your Eric Kramer story pulls every emotion out of human beings. Let our listeners know what you got going on at golongtd.com, and that Eric Kramer story is bananas.
Man, thank you so much for reading that, Mike. It was, my God, I feel like we could have talked for, 10, 20, 30 hours, and we still wouldn't have uncovered much of it. It's crazy. I mean, from the severe depression to the suicide attempts to his brain taking 5 years to wake up, to an ex-girlfriend then coercing him into a sham marriage, and between her and the legal system stealing $700,000. It's insane. He's good now. His brain is in a great place, and he wants to talk about it. He's got a reputation that he believes was ruined through an invented domestic assault charge. So I think that Eric Kramer is willing and able to share his story finally when he couldn't for 5 years with the brain, as he said, of a 6-year-old. It
is very, very cool. The story is just, I mean, it feels like it could be a Netflix docuseries. It really could, Tyler.
I agree. And I don't think this is the end of him telling his story. I think we'll have to figure something out because there's a lot more to get into, trust me.
Tyler, appreciate it, man. It is good to track you down. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again, and it won't take me 6 attempts to do it.